Would you agree a whole lot of money has been spent, especially in America, but in other countries too, trying to get faster and faster horses to win races? Kentucky Derby, for example. Would it be possible to ever breed wings on a horse? Do you think that could ever be done? They'd certainly win the Kentucky Derby if they had wings that could fly. There are some big animals that could fly, you know. So
you're not going to get it in 50 or 60 years.
You think they could get it in 10 million years? Get a horse with wings?
Why not?
Was that a yes? I couldn't hear what he said.
Why not? What's the limit there? We know of things that can fly with their front limbs and can walk on hind limbs, and horses have both of those.
So do you think a horse could...
They might be limited by their bone density. I have no idea.
Well, so far they've been able to get horses slightly faster, but they get problems when they, just like with any farm type animals is the best because that's where all the selective breeding is done today, most of it. They get cows that give more milk, cows that give more beef. Okay.
And they look totally different from their wild counterparts.
Well, no, in the wild it never happens. In nature, in laboratory, you can maybe make it go a little further. Take the cow as an example. There are cows that give more milk. I saw one that gives 100 pounds of milk every day. Illinois that year had the record holder for the cow that gives the most milk. It was in Kankakee, Illinois, at a farm. So I took my students to see it.
Those are the features we're selecting for, though. So we're not going to see other changes. We're throwing out the changes we don't want.
I agree. I think you're finally starting to see it. It's man doing this, and he always runs into a stone wall. You can't get too far. There's a limit to the changes, and it's still recognizable as the same kind. And it's less strong as the wild counterpart. Left in the wild, most of the modern cows would all die. They couldn't hold up.
The limit to the changes is if you can survive. So there's a lot of variance in every population, and populations will move towards one direction in that variance. And repeated over millions of years, that you're going to get a new population that has different features.
That's what you believe. I'd like to see, where's this observable? Science is something we can observe. Where is a new population that has been observed to come in recorded human history? They've been watching cows or pigs or sheep for a long time. Is there anything besides the fossils, which again you couldn't prove had any children that lived? Certainly you couldn't prove they had. Why could the fossil have children that were different when no animal today can have children that are different? Why can the bones do it and the ones today can't do it? What happened?
They can. There's an astounding diversity in all the children of every population. And we observe the formation of new traits in the same population. So that's what we're saying. You're not going to get a non-cow from a cow. You're going to get a cow with a new trait, whether it's just something that's bigger in their body or shorter, or whether it's a new mutation. But we've observed both happening in the wild and in the lab.
So do you believe that a cow came from something like a bacteria or an amoeba, a single-celled creature, 600 million years ago, and did that single-celled creature, that amoeba or whatever one you want to use, did it turn into a cow? And so it certainly gained a whole lot of new traits that amoeba don't have. I don't think amoeba have udders or horns or bones. So how did it get these new traits to go from an amoeba to a cow? And where's the evidence of that?
Well, amoebas have most of the same genetic material. So an udder, there's not just a gene for an udder. It tells the cells to grow in a certain way and then differentiate in a certain way. And a gene from any amoeba could probably do that. It's just a regulatory gene.
So the amoeba could turn into a cow over 600 million years on its own in the wild, even though amoeba are still having babies today and they're called amoeba.
More like a couple billion years.
Okay, we'll give you 200 trillion years. Why don't we see it happen in the laboratory? Amoeba produce amoeba. No exceptions.
We see these small steps.
Yeah, I know you have a big SpongeBob imagination. You imagine that amoeba can turn into a cow. It's just not that simple, Taylor.
We imagine it, we put it to the test, it makes predictions, and then we observe the steps in the lab. And just because there are gaps in the steps, you're inserting your God of the gaps, and that's not science.
No. Put it to the test. I'll give you all the time you want to change an amoeba into anything non-amoeba. How long have they been doing research in the laboratory trying to cause mutations in different, and of course single-celled organisms sometimes have a 20-minute generation time. That's the ideal place to test it because you could condense equivalent of tens of thousands of years into one human lifespan.
That's not how
They-
evolution works. So when we've observed multicellularity, it's still an algae. It's an algae when it was unicellular, and it's still an algae when it's multicellular, even though it has differentiated tissues.